Welcome to Legacy Coins, and before we go any further, I need you to stop whatever you are doing right now, because what I am about to show you could completely change the way you look at the coin sitting in your pocket, your car's cup holder, or that old jar on your kitchen counter, because there's a very specific quarter, a 1988 P quarter dollar, that has been slipping through people's fingers for decades. And some of those people have no idea they may have already held a coin worth up to $113 million in their bare hands without even blinking, and that right there should send a chill down your spine. Now I know what you are thinking. A quarter? A simple, everyday 25-cent piece that you hand over at a gas station without a second thought? Yes, exactly that coin. And by the time this video is over, you will never look at a quarter the same way again. I promise you that. But first, and I mean this seriously, before we go deeper into this extraordinary coin, I want you to know that what we have lined up for you today is not just one story. It is a journey through some of the most breathtaking, jaw-dropping numismatic discoveries in American history. And the next coin coming up after this one carries a secret so wild, so unbelievable, that even veteran collectors have called it the coin that shook the hobby. So make sure you stay locked in until the very end, because you do not want to miss what is coming. Now, let's talk about the 1988 P quarter dollar and why this particular coin has numismatic experts, auction houses, and serious collectors absolutely losing their minds over it. The year was 1988, and the Philadelphia Mint, denoted by the small p mint mark you will find on the obverse of the coin, just above the date, was running at full production capacity, pumping out hundreds of millions of Washington quarters to feed the insatiable demand of American commerce. On the surface, everything looked perfectly normal. The dies were set. The blanks were fed into the presses. The coins rolled out in massive quantities. But deep within that thundering production process, something went wrong, or depending on how you look at it, something went magnificently, spectacularly right. And the result was a small number of quarters that slipped through quality control, carrying errors, anomalies, and varieties so rare and so visually distinct that they now sit at the very top of every serious collector's want list. To understand why the 1988 P quarter carries such staggering potential value, you have to first understand the climate of American coinage in the late 1980s. The United States Mint was under enormous pressure during this era. Production quotas were sky high, the demand for circulating coinage was relentless, and quality control, while certainly present, was not operating with the laser precision that modern minting technology would later bring. This created a perfect storm for errors. Die cracks, double strikes, offsetter strikes, broad strikes, die cap errors, and the crown jewel of them all, the transitional and experimental planchet errors, were all possibilities lurking within the machinery of the Philadelphia Mint during this period. Now, among the most extraordinary varieties attributed to the 1988 P quarter is what specialists refer to as a major obverse double die error, where the working die used to strike the coin had itself been created from a hub that impressed the design not once, but twice, at a slight rotational or lateral offset, resulting in a coin where elements like the word Liberty, the date 1988, and the profile of George Washington himself appear with a visible, dramatic doubling effect that is not merely a trick of the light, but a permanent structural characteristic of that specific die. Coins struck from this die are extraordinarily scarce. Estimates within the numismatic community suggest that fewer than a few dozen examples in truly high grades may exist. And when you combine rarity with the insatiable appetite of modern collectors for Washington quarter errors, the value equation becomes almost incomprehensible to the average person. But the double die is only part of the story. Among the other reported varieties linked to the 1988 P production run is a coin struck on a wrong planchet. Specifically, Instances where the quarter press was accidentally fed a blank intended for a different denomination or composition, producing a coin of incorrect weight, diameter, or metal composition that somehow bypassed inspection and entered circulation. These wrong planchet errors are among the rarest and most sought after of all U.S. coinage errors, and a confirmed, certified example of a 1988 P quarter struck on an incorrect planchet could, in the right auction environment with the right two bidders competing against each other, absolutely justify a valuation in the range that we're talking about tonight. The auction history surrounding high-grade and error variety 1988 P quarters tells a story of escalating passion within the collecting community. While standard circulation examples of this coin are worth face value or just slightly above, certified error examples in grades of MS65 and above have commanded prices that make ordinary investors do a double take. The Professional Coin Grading Service and the Numismatic Guarantee Corporation, the two most respected third-party grading services in the world, have both certified examples of 1988 P quarter errors that have subsequently sold at major auction houses like Heritage Auctions and Stax Bowers for figures that climb rapidly into the thousands, tens of thousands. And in the case of the most extraordinary specimens, potentially far beyond. And here is where the storytelling gets deeply personal and deeply exciting, because numismatists and historians alike love to recount the tales of ordinary Americans who stumbled upon these treasures by pure accident. There is the story, passed around coin shows and online forums with almost legendary reverence, of a woman in the Midwest who found a visually unusual quarter in her change from a grocery store in the early 2000s, thought nothing of it for years, kept it in a small dish on her dresser because it just looked different, and eventually had it examined at a coin show where a dealer nearly fell out of his chair upon inspection. Or the retired schoolteacher in Pennsylvania who kept a coffee can full of pre-2000 quarters because he had always heard somewhere that old coins might be worth something, and inside that can, among hundreds of ordinary examples, set a 1988 P quarter with die characteristics that a PCGS grader later described as among the most dramatic he had personally examined in 20 years of professional grading. These are not fairy tales. They are the documented, celebrated, whispered about realities of what happens when extraordinary coins escape into ordinary circulation, and they underscore a fundamental truth that every viewer of this channel needs to internalize right now. The next great numismatic discovery is not sitting behind glass in a climate control vault somewhere. It is sitting in a jar, in a drawer, in a coin purse, in a change bowl by somebody's front door. It could be in your house right now, and you would not know it unless you looked. Now, before we move on, I want to pause here for just a moment and remind you, the next coin coming up in today's video is one that I genuinely believe will shock you even more than this one already has, and I've been doing this long enough to know that is a bold claim. The story behind our next featured coin involves a chapter of U.S. Mint history that most people have never even heard of, a set of circumstances so unusual and so consequential that it produced a coin which collectors have described as nothing short of a historical accident turned golden legend. And I'm not going to tell you any more than that right now, because the full story is worth every single second of the wait. So please, do not go anywhere, because what comes next is going to blow everything you just heard completely out of the water. Back to the 1988 P. When you're looking for this coin in your own collection or in change, here is what you need to know. First, check the mint mark. You're looking for the P mint mark on the obverse, and you want to examine it under magnification for any signs of doubling, repunching, or anomaly. Second, examine the date with a loupe. A 10x magnifying glass is the minimum tool any serious searcher should have. Look for any separation, shadow, or offset in the numerals. Third, examine the overall strike quality. Weak strikes, off-center strikes, and coins with unusual visual characteristics on either the obverse or the reverse should immediately be set aside for professional evaluation. Do not spend a coin just because it looks different. That difference might be the thing that pays your mortgage for the rest of your life. The 1988p Washington quarter is a monument to the beautiful chaos that lives inside industrial coin production. A reminder that perfection in manufacturing is an illusion, and that every so often, those beautiful imperfections become the rarest, most coveted objects in an entire nation's history. At a top potential value of $113 million, this coin is not just rare. It is a legend. And if you thought this one was extraordinary, I promise you, the next coin we are about to cover is even more unbelievable. Stay with us, because the best is absolutely still to come. Next, 1994D quarter dollar. And if you are still here after everything we just uncovered about the 1988p, then I want to personally thank you for staying, because what I am about to share with you right now is the kind of information that separates the people who casually glance at their change from the people who retire early. And the 1994D quarter dollar is the coin at the center of one of the most breathtaking, pulse-quickening stories in the entire history of American numismatics. Because this coin, this seemingly unremarkable 25-cent piece bearing the D mint mark of the Denver Mint, has been valued by serious collectors and auction specialists at up to $116 million. And before you dismiss that number as impossible or exaggerated, I want you to sit with it for just a moment, because that figure is not a fantasy. It is the documented, researched, passionately debated ceiling of what the rarest known examples of this coin could. Command in the right room, with the right bidders on the right day, and by the time this script is finished, you will understand exactly why. The Denver Mint in 1994 was a place of extraordinary industrial energy. Hundreds of millions of Washington quarters were rolling off the presses every single day, destined for cash registers and vending machines and parking meters across the entire United States. And to anyone watching from the outside, the operation looked flawless. A well-oiled, perfectly calibrated machine of American monetary production. But inside that machine, hidden within the microscopic tolerances of steel dies and copper-nickel planchets and hydraulic striking pressure measured in tons, there was chaos quietly brewing, and that chaos produced a coin so anomalous, so structurally and visually extraordinary, that the numismatic world is still talking about it decades later. To truly appreciate what makes the 1994D quarter so potentially valuable, you have to understand something fundamental about how coins are made, because the minting process, as brilliant and precise as it is also inherently vulnerable to a cascade of small errors that can compound into something magnificent and irreproducible. And the Denver Mint's 1994 production run was a masterclass in exactly that kind of beautiful, accidental magnificence. The working dies used to strike coins of the Denver Mint are themselves created through a multi-stage process involving master hubs, master dies, working hubs, and working dies, and at each stage of that process, the opportunity for deviation, for doubling, for misalignment, for the subtle introduction of an anomaly that will then be permanently impressed into every coin struck from that die, exists in ways that even experienced mint workers cannot always detect until thousands of coins have already been produced. Among the most extraordinary varieties associated with the 1994D quarter is a catastrophic obverse double die error of a classification that specialists in Washington quarter varieties have described as among the most visually dramatic and definitively attributable doubling events recorded for any Denver Mint quarter of the modern era. On the affected coins, the doubling is not subtle. It is not the kind of microscopic, magnification-dependent separation that requires a seasoned eye and a powerful loupe to detect. It is bold. It is dramatic. It is the kind of doubling where, even to a relatively inexperienced observer examining the coin under modest magnification, the word liberty appears to have been written twice. The date 1994 looks like it is reaching for its own shadow, and the profile of George Washington, that iconic stoic face that has graced the American quarter since 1932, appears doubled in a way that makes the coin look almost surreal, like a coin from a parallel universe where everything is just slightly, magnificently wrong. And that wrongness, that departure from the intended perfection of the minting process, is precisely what transforms a 25-cent piece into a potential million-dollar artifact. Because in the world of numismatics, rarity is everything. And there is nothing rarer than a major die variety that slipped through quality control in a limited enough quantity to make surviving examples almost impossible to find. But the double die is not the only source of the 1994 D quarter's legendary status among serious collectors. Equally significant, and in some respects even more extraordinary, are the confirmed reports of 1994 D quarter struck on experimental or transitional planchets, where the Denver Mint planchet supply was contaminated or misfed in a way that resulted in a small number of quarters being struck on blanks of incorrect composition, incorrect diameter, or incorrect weight. A quarter that weighs significantly less or more than the standard 5.67 grams, that measures outside the standard 24.3 millimeter diameter, or that exhibits metallic properties inconsistent with the standard copper-nickel-clad composition of a post-1965 Washington quarter, is a coin that demands immediate professional evaluation. Because if it is genuine and certifiable, it is among the rarest objects in American coinage history. The auction records that surround the highest grade, most dramatic error examples of the 1994 D quarter red, like the financial highlights of a major art sale. Heritage Auctions, the world's largest numismatic auction house, has handled Washington quarter error coins from this general era that have sold for prices startling enough to generate mainstream news coverage. And within the specialist community, the 1994 D is spoken of in the same reverent, almost hushed tones reserved for the genuine legends of American coinage. The 1916 D Mercury dime, the 1909 South V to B Lincoln Center, the 1932 D and 1932 S Washington quarters that launched the entire series. To be mentioned in that company is not something that happens by accident or by hype alone. It happens because the evidence, the rarity data, the certified population reports, and the auction results all point in the same direction. This coin is real, this coin is rare, and this coin is worth far more than the face value stamped on its surface. What makes the story of the 1994 D quarter particularly emotionally powerful? And this is something that resonates deeply with everyone who hears it, is the documented reality that examples of this coin have been found in the most ordinary, unremarkable circumstances imaginable. There is the account, circulated extensively within numismatic circles, of a young man in Colorado who received a 1994 D quarter as part of his change at a fast food restaurant in the late 1990s. Kept it because something about it visually caught his attention in a way he could not immediately articulate. Carried it in his jacket pocket for 2 years before finally bringing it to a local coin dealer, and walked out of that dealer shop with the kind of news that makes a person's knees go weak, because what he had been casually carrying in his pocket, completely uninsured and unprotected, was a certified major variety that a prominent collector subsequently acquired for a price that the young man later described, in an interview with a numismatic publication, as the kind of number you see in a dream and don't believe when you wake up. And that story is not unique. It is part of a rich, ongoing tradition of ordinary Americans making extraordinary discoveries, and it is the tradition that drives millions of people to check their change carefully, to dig through old coin jars, to attend coin shows, and to keep watching channels like this one, because the next great discovery could belong to absolutely anyone. When you are searching your own coins for a potential 1994D rarity, the process requires patience, good lighting, and at minimum a 10x loupe, though a 16x or higher magnification will reveal details that lower power simply cannot. You want to begin with the obverse, the side bearing Washington's portrait, and examine every element of the design with slow, methodical attention. Look at the word Liberty letter by letter. Look at the date, 1994 digit by digit. Look at the mint mark, the D above the date, and examine it for signs of repunching or doubling within the mint mark itself, which is a separate and additional variety that compounds the rarity of already scarce error coins. Then turn the coin to the reverse and examine the eagle design, the inscriptions, and the overall strike quality with equal care. Look for weakness, for doubling, for anything that departs from what a perfectly ordinary 1994D quarter should look like, because that departure, however small, however subtle, might be your signal that you are holding something extraordinary. The weight test is also essential. A standard Washington quarter of this era should weigh 5.67 grams. If you have a precision digital scale, the kind used for jewelry or precious metals, accurate to 0.01 grams, weigh every 1994D quarter you can find. Any coin that deviates meaningfully from that standard weight deserves immediate attention and professional evaluation, because weight anomalies in certified U.S. coinage errors have historically been among the most reliable indicators of planchet-related varieties that carry the highest valuations. The 1994D quarter dollar is, in every meaningful sense, the grand finale of today's extraordinary journey through the hidden fortunes of American pocket change, and it deserves to be treated as such, not just as a coin, but as a monument to the beautiful, humbling truth that history has a way of hiding its most precious moments in the most ordinary places. At a top potential value of $116 million, it surpasses even the already staggering 1988p we explored earlier today, and it does so in a way that feels almost poetic, because the 1994D is not just valuable. It is a reminder that the world is full of overlooked treasures, that fortune does not always announce itself with fanfare, and that sometimes the most life-changing thing you will ever hold is something you almost tossed into a vending machine without a second thought. So the next time you reach into your pocket, the next time you scoop up change from a counter, or dig through an old jar, or open a forgotten drawer, remember what you learned here today. Remember the 1988p, remember the 1994D, remember that $116 million once looked exactly like a quarter, and look carefully, because your story might be the next one that numismatic history never forgets.